And I apologize to you for shifting the focus in my remarks from the issue of Iran and its nuclear capacity. I'm sure Wolfgang did not invite me here because of my expertise on either nuclear issues nor on Iran. So I'm going to talk about self-determination, the heart, I think, of the mission of the Liechtenstein Initiative, and take us back to when this project was first coming together. And a group of us, some in Princeton and some outside Princeton, put together a volume that was edited by Hurst Hannum, as I recall, on self-determination. And I contributed a chapter on self-determination movements in the Middle East. This was probably about 1994, whenever we stood in that parking lot together. And I've tried to remember what I said. I think I do remember what I said. First of all, at that point in time, there was a great deal of focus, both in academia and in the real world, on democratic transitions. We had witnessed a number of them in Central Europe, and we hoped to see them in Central Asia as the Soviet Union came apart. We certainly had seen them in Latin America and parts of the Far East. So it was very much in the public view at that time. And I tried to juxtapose our concerns with democratic transitions with our concerns for self-determination. And I came to the conclusion at that time, and I think on reflection I still maintain it, that democratization is probably more important than self-determination if the two are not working in tandem. And I want to just briefly explain my position on that. I think at the present time there are 4 theaters in the Middle East where self-determination is highly relevant. They are theaters in which there is some kind of aggrieved population that feels it has not been given sufficient autonomy or control over its own affairs. And self-determination is, in its essence, groups, societal groups, trying to gain control over their own basic affairs. Those 4 theaters, taking first the 2 that I will not talk about, Palestine, that could take us very far and very long, but much more obscure, the Western Sahara lying between Morocco and Mauritania. I'm not going to say anything about those. The other 2 are the Southern Sudan, which will be very much in our eyesight in the month of January, and the Kurdish regions of Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria, which are not quite such hot-button issues at the present time as the Southern Sudan, but definitely an area of concern. I will say only a few words about northern Iraq and the Iraqi Kurds. The conundrum that I see is what I would call the infinite regress of oppression. That in trying to solve the problems of an aggrieved population through self-determination, there is a very high risk that you simply create a new set of problems of oppression. And let me begin first with the Southern Sudan to try to explain what I mean by all this. It seems to me highly likely that in the month of January, if, and it's a big if, a referendum goes forward in the Southern Sudan on whether it wishes to remain a part of the Republic of Sudan or become an independent country, that we will see it vote to become an independent country. What might that country look like? It will clearly be dominated by the major tribal confederation of the Southern Sudan, the Dinka. They are numerically by far the most powerful, and they have always been the kind of elite and source of leadership in the Southern Sudan, even in its present role as part of the Sudanese Republic. There will be many other large groups of population in the Southern Sudan who will be very unhappy with this. They will find, I think we will see, they will find Dinka oppression as bad or even worse than what is perceived as the oppression of the North and Khartoum. This is the infinite regress. And I will take it one step further. When you have a new set of aggrieved populations as the result of self-determination, it opens the door to the former dominant power to manipulate the aggrieved populations at the expense of the new entity. Southern Sudan will be highly unstable. I would predict that Khartoum would successfully fish in troubled waters and destabilize whatever Dinka-based regime emerges in the southern Sudan, and the resulting entity may really satisfy no one, including the Dinka themselves. That's a rather pessimistic prediction, but it's one that I think needs to be entertained. I would say the same about the Kurds of northern Iraq, who have had the most persistent drive for some kind of autonomy, if not complete independence, over several decades. And I'm sure that from the press, most of you are aware that there are other populations that live in northern Kurdistan, particularly the Turkoman, but large Christian populations and large Arab populations who will not be happy with Kurdish domination in the north were it ever to become fully autonomous, indeed independent. And as in the southern Sudan, those populations open the doors to manipulation or interference in the internal affairs of a new entity by all sorts of potential actors in the Kurdish arena. Baghdad itself, which will always be dominated by Arabs of one sort or another, Sunni or Shia, but of course Turkey and to a certain extent Iran. I don't think Syria would be a very active player, but could be. So an independent Kurdistan, which is not really being discussed very actively now, would not, I think, solve a Kurdish problem, and it would create problems for the other populations in northern Iraq. So I come back to a stress on democracy, which may seem as distant in many instances as self-determination, but one that I think provides better solutions, even in the absence of self-determination. I neglected to mention in both of the two areas I looked at another factor which can be addressed through democratic process but cannot really be addressed through self-determination. And that is often aggrieved populations are not concentrated in a single area. In fact, they're scattered and they have large diasporas. We know, and I know I have a Turkish colleague here, probably the largest urban concentrations of Kurds anywhere are in Istanbul and Ankara and Izmir in Turkey, not in Kurdistan. And indeed, there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of Sudanese Southerners living in Khartoum. We can also add to that that both in Turkey and in Sudan, there has been extensive intermarriage of rival populations. There is what in Latin America would be called mestizos. What do you do with them? Are they Kurdish or are they not Kurdish? Are they Southern Sudanese or are they not Southern Sudanese? Self-determination cannot address their problems. And this is going to be huge for the Southern Sudanese populations in Khartoum if in January the South declares its independence. So I think if you aggrieved populations are going to find better redress to their grievances through some kind of democratic process where they might be outnumbered, but where, as we have seen just recently in Iraq, the aggrieved population can act as a kind of swing force in determining coalitions and democratically elected coalitions. They can defend their interests by playing the critical role of swing forces in a democratic system. So I think I will conclude there. I tried to revisit my thinking of over 15 years ago to see if I still recognize myself, and I think I do, and I will save my State Department career for another time.